Welcome to the Explainer, everyone. Grab a seat, get comfortable, because today is officially your very first day of class in Ecology 101. I am absolutely thrilled to be your professor today as we embark on this huge, fascinating journey to study, well, our biological home. We're going to be exploring the magnificent architecture of the natural world, starting all the way down from the tiniest individual organisms, and then we're going to scale that up to the entire globe. So get your mental notebooks ready, and let's dive right into the rules that govern life on Earth. All right, so here is a quick look at today's course syllabus. First up, we'll establish what ecology actually means and welcome you to our ecological home. Second, we're going to climb the biological hierarchy. Third, we'll zoom in on population dynamics. Fourth, we'll hit the limits of nature. And finally, number 5, we'll wrap up by exploring how different species actually interact out there. Section 1. Welcome to our ecological home. Understanding the roots of ecology. To really grasp this topic, we kind of have to start at the very beginning with the word itself, ecology. It actually comes from the Greek word oikos, which literally means home. So when we're studying ecology, we aren't just studying some, abstract concept of nature that exists way out there in the woods. No, we are literally studying our shared home. And that means looking at the relationships between living things, what we call the biotic factors, like plants, animals, decomposers, and the non-living physical environment, the abiotic factors. Think about it for a second. If we didn't have abiotic factors like, the right amount of light, temperature, water, or soil, well, plants wouldn't be able to photosynthesize. And without plants making food, the rest of us definitely wouldn't survive. So ecology is really the study of how all these living and non-living pieces fit together under one giant global roof. Moving on to Section 2, the biological hierarchy, zooming out from the micro to the macro. Now, biology is incredibly organized. It's like a giant puzzle. We start at the very bottom with a single organism. Like if I study just you, or just one single dog, I'm looking at individual physiology. But if we gather all the individuals of that exact same species in one specific area, say all the humans in your city, boom, we've leveled up to a population. Step it up again, and we get a community. This is all the living species in that area. Humans, dogs, cats, trees, insects, the whole shebang. Now, what happens if you introduce the non-living elements to that community? The water, the soil, the weather. Well, you finally get an ecosystem, which is where the really functional interactions happen. Zoom out even further to massive regions that share a specific climate, like a huge desert or a tropical rainforest, and we have a biome. And finally, if you bundle every single biome together, you reach the absolute top of the ladder, the biosphere. This leads us to a pretty profound realization. Our entire planet Earth is really just the sum of all these local ecosystems. It's one massive, deeply interconnected global ecosystem. Honestly, it just gives you this incredible sense of awe about the sheer scale of the biological world that we're participating in every single day. All right, Section 3, understanding population dynamics, how we measure our biological neighbors. So now that we've seen the massive big picture, I want us to zoom all the way back in and focus specifically on that second tier of the hierarchy we just talked about, populations. How exactly do we measure our biological neighbors? Well, an individual organism is pretty straightforward, right? It lives, and eventually it dies. You either have a birthday or you don't. But a population? That is a highly dynamic entity. It has measurable rates and ratios that define its overall health. For instance, we measure birth rates and death rates per capita, which just means per head or per individual, over a specific amount of time. We also measure the sex ratio, so the proportion of males to females. And absolutely crucial is the age distribution. We group the population into 3 brackets: pre-reproductive, which is the youth; reproductive, the adults currently having offspring; and post-reproductive, the elders. And comparing that pre-reproductive group to the reproductive group, it basically acts like a crystal ball for demographers. If you have way more children, that pre-reproductive group, than adults, your population is going to expand rapidly in the future, and that creates this triangular or normal-shaped pyramid. If the numbers are pretty much equal, the population is stable, giving you a bell shape. But if you have fewer youths coming up to replace the adults, your population is going to decline, taking on this narrower, urn-shaped pyramid. This one simple comparison literally tells us the entire future of a species in a given area. Pretty amazing, right? But I need to point out that just counting sheer numbers isn't always the smartest way to measure a population. Imagine a field filled with 20,000 tiny Parthenium weeds, and right smack in the middle is a single, massive banyan tree. If you're just looking at raw numbers, the weeds dominate, 20,000 to 1. But obviously, that one banyan tree provides way more photosynthesis, shade, and overall ecological impact. So in cases like this, measuring biomass or surface cover makes way more sense. Or think about tigers. You definitely can't just walk up and count them one by one without becoming lunch. Instead, we measure relative density indirectly, like by counting their footprints or pug marks near a watering hole. Okay, let's move to Section 4, the limits of nature, the mathematical rules of growth. Let's talk about the mathematical models that dictate how these populations actually grow out there in the real world, because nature has very strict rules. Now, if you give a population unlimited food and unlimited space, they're just going to eat, reproduce, and multiply infinitely. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, you get the idea. This creates a steep J-shaped curve on a graph, and we call that exponential growth. But, as you can probably guess, this is highly unrealistic. Nature is just not that generous. In reality, resources are limited, and that brings us to logistic growth. This creates an S-shaped curve. The population grows slowly at first, accelerates a bit, but then it eventually slows down and totally levels off as resources start getting tight. This is the logical, realistic model of how populations actually behave. And the reason that S-shaped curve eventually levels off is because of a very hard biological limit called carrying capacity. In equations, we represent this with the letter K. Think of it like a bedroom in your house. If a bedroom only has enough physical space for 10 beds, you can only comfortably fit 10 people in it. If an 11th person walks in, someone else has to leave or everybody suffers. Nature works the exact same way. A specific jungle might only have enough food to sustain exactly 100 elephants. That 100 is the carrying capacity. Nature always sets a hard limit on growth. And that brings us to Section 5, how species interact, the drama of the ecosystem. So this is the final section of today's syllabus. We know that populations live together in communities, but how do they actually deal with each other? Well, welcome to the drama of the ecosystem. To understand this drama, we map it out using really simple mathematics, plus, minus, and 0. In mutualism, both species get a plus. They both win. In commensalism, one gets a plus and the other gets a 0, meaning they're completely unaffected. And in amensalism, one gets a minus, so they are actively harmed, while the other remains completely neutral at 0. Let's look at some incredible stories from nature to really bring this math to life. We'll start with amensalism. Imagine a penicillium fungus. It naturally produces and secretes an antibiotic, penicillin. Now, if any bacteria happen to wander too close to this fungus, they are completely destroyed. That is a massive minus for the bacteria. But here is the kicker. The fungus doesn't actually gain any direct nutritional benefit from killing the bacteria. It's just doing what it naturally does. The fungus is entirely neutral, a 0, while the bacteria is destroyed with a minus. Now, commensalism is where one species gets a huge win and the other simply doesn't care. For example, an orchid gains physical support by growing high up in a mango tree, but it leaves the tree totally unharmed. Or think of barnacles getting a free ride across the ocean on a whale that doesn't even notice they're there. You also have the egrets snagging an easy meal of insects that are stirred up by grazing cattle, while the cows just keep chewing their grass. Oh, and the clownfish. It gets a safe home hiding in a sea anemone's stinging tentacles, gaining awesome protection while offering the anemone absolutely nothing in return. But of course, nature also has these beautifully complex partnerships where everybody wins. This is mutualism. Take the fig tree and the female wasp. The wasp needs a safe place to lay her eggs, right? So she enters the fig fruit, she gets a highly secure nursery, and her larvae get to eat some of the developing fig seeds. In return, as the wasp is moving around inside doing her thing, she pollinates the fig's flowers. The wasp gets housing and food, and the fig ensures its next generation is planted. It's just a perfect plus-plus relationship. I have to end today's lecture with one of the most mind-blowing evolutionary tricks in existence. The Mediterranean orchid, known as Ophrys, uses a wildly sneaky strategy called sexual deceit. Basically, it wants to be pollinated, but it doesn't want to waste its own energy producing nectar to reward a bee. So it literally evolved one of its petals to look and even smell exactly like a female bee. No way, right? A male bee flies by, thinks he's found a mate, and eagerly lands to interact. As he bumbles around on the flower, eventually realizing he's been tricked, the orchid drops a packet of pollen right onto his back. The bee flies off disappointed, only to be tricked by another orchid down the road, successfully cross-pollinating the plants. It's a staggering example of how species co-evolve and interact out there. And with that, class, we wrap up our introduction to ecology. But your homework for today isn't some boring worksheet. It's a change of perspective. Later today, when you step outside your front door and look at the physical environment around your home, the birds, the trees, the soil, the weather, I really want you to ask yourself, what specific level of the biological hierarchy are you truly observing? Are you looking at a population, a community, an entire ecosystem? Think about how you interact with them and how they interact with you. Class dismissed.